So let's start the recording. So in today's the session, we are going to focus on the replication and high availability in MongoDB. And we are going to set up what we call the replica set. And then we are going to focus on what might happen when there's a failure, and also look at what about these reading preferences, right? So the step one is we need to set up several replica set. Now to do that, let me go back, and then I'm going to go back to my uh, the 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 folder that I actually saved. So in this case, I have under this MongoDB, and under the server we have version 1, and this is the directory. So you can see I have a couple of things, MongoDB and then Mongo shell. So the first step is we know usually we have to start with MongoDB, and then you can go for Mongo shell. So that's what we have done so far. So for example, in generally, when we have a single case, we can say MongoD, which will create the state. And then, okay, so this is what I have, and then I can create a Mongo shell. So let me start another shell where I'm going to have the Mongo shell. Right now you can see. So I'm going to log into this. I'm going to go back to the same. Right now you can see in the second one, I actually use Mongo shell, where now I actually log into the command line. Now, what we did the last time, for example, I can use company 1, right? And then we can say, okay, company 1.employee.find. Sorry, let me see collections. Let me check. The problem is my spelling mistake. Use company 1. This is exactly what I want to do. Okay. And then what I want to show you is show collections. And then it's employee. Then I just want to find in MongoDB. So for this, I can see what is in. So in this case, DB, then let's say employee dot. Okay, so this is what we did. Okay. Now, one issue might be like in this particular case, we have a single instant in the failure of this, the data is not available. So what we are going to discuss in today's session, how we can create replica set and then use that the replica set. We are going to have multiple, and then we will see whenever there's a failure in one set, how the MongoDB handles it, right? But before that, let me see how many of you have set up this and then you have up to this point. Can you please let me know, indicate that, okay, you have set up this and you are successful up to this point? Those who have any issues, can you please type in the chat, like what kind of problems you might have?
Sir, how to get the first window? I am not able to find that file in my bin folder.
Siraj, have you installed this? The first of all, uh, so let me start from the beginning because I forgot to record. So yeah, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to end this. Right, and make sure that the data directory is clean. Right, so I have some data. So I'm going to start fresh. Okay, go back. Here is a command that I'm going to use. So I have typed MongoD. The command is to start the MongoDB server. To create the replica set, we use the switch r dash dash replica set rs name. And I specify a port here because I'm going to use the same machine. So I'm going to plan is to change different ports. So the first one, I'm going to listen 27,017. And then I also specify my data directory, right? So you have to have this data directory to create. So idea is you are going to store some MongoDB data files here. And then when I press enter, if it is successful, you can see something like this. Okay, now let's go back. Let's create two more. So I'm going to get another command line. Right. So you can see now, maybe I will share the whole screen. So let me take, right. So here's what I have, one, and then this is what is running the first replica. So I have another one now here to create the second replica, right? So I'm going to go to again. Right. So the second one, the command will be this very similar, except, sorry, I will use some other name for that. So let me use MongoD and then replica set. Sorry, it should be dash dash replica set rs name. This time I'm going to use the next port 27,018 and my data path db path. I will say okay, C. It should be data, this time db2. Right now it is also keep on running it. Right. So we have now running two, my first one, the second one. Let me take another command prompt. Right. So let me create the third one now. So the third one, MongoD. We have replica set. I'm using the next port. So next port I use 27,090 and then DB path database, the data directory. I will set it up as data. Sorry, it was an error. Data. DB3. Right. Now you can see my, this is, right. I have three command prompt, which I will have three replica sets. Right. Okay, the next thing that you have to do is you have to connect one of these, the replica set that you have created. So I'm going to connect the very first one, which is the primary instance. So the command is Mongo shell, and then I have to specify port to say which instance I'm going to connect it to. So it should be 17. Yeah. So now I have successfully connected to my first replica set, and ideally it should be the primary instance. Right. Just to discuss what we have done so far, we are setting up the replica set. So we open up several command line windows, and then we first create MongoDB instances for the replica set. For that, we use MongoD command with replica set name, port number, and data path, directory path. And the final one, we use Mongo shell and connect to one of these, right? That's what we did. Next step. The next one is you have to initialize the replica set. So the command that you have to type is type rs.initiate, right? With colon. So which will, when you say rs.initiate, you are going to create a replica set. So now what we have done so far, we initiate the replica set and then we check the status. And now when you check the status with RS initiate, and once you initiate and then when you say RS status, you will see that our particular instance is taken as a primary. The next step is we have to add all the secondary instances to this replica set. So the command is rs add. So rs add. And by doing so, what we are trying to do, we are trying to add our other instances. So the right now, my instance are in the same machine. So it's in the local host. And then I have to specify the port number. So the second one I will put as 27,018 and then I will press enter. Now you can see some message like this. Again, if you type status, you should now see that, okay, we have primary. That is the first one as a primary and the second one as the secondary, right? So you should see now by adding one, my first server is taken as a primary server and then the second one as a secondary server. The command that we have used is rs add. Local host, and here is the command I am going to share with everyone. Right. Let me continue. Let's add the next one. So the third one I'm going to add to the same. And now you can see I have primary and I have, so let me check the status. So now you can see I have primary server and two secondary servers. Now that we have connected primary server and two secondary servers, right? And we are successful. Now let's add some document, right? Yes, what you should do is maybe we can say add a new test database and create a collection and add something. So let me have a test database. So I'm going to say use test DB. And now I'm going to add a collection and insert a record. So I will say DB test collection 1, insert one document. Let me put just a name and I will say, okay, test document. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually adding one document here. Now this is in the primary, remember? Now we have created the primary. Now ideally what should happen? Now this document should be replicated in the other replicated sets, isn't it? Secondaries, isn't it? So now you can see what we have here. So for example, right now we have created test collection 1, and what we have right now is just one document. And this is what I have. This is primary. Now, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to now I leave the primary here. I will get another Mongo shell instance, and then I'm going to connect to the secondary and check whether now this is whether this is available in the secondary. Right? So what I'm going to do, I will take a new shell now, and I'm going to connect to the one of the secondaries. So I will go back. So now remember, I'm going to use different port. Originally I had in 17. Now I'm going to connect into 80. So now you can see that it says RS name, direct, secondary, and test. So now let's look at show DBS. You can now see the test DB is even available there as well, which indicates that what we created in the primary is also replicated here as well. Now just check and see, let's say DB test collection 1 find. Okay, well, we have to say read set read preference. I'm going to say secondary. Sorry, let me just check. Sorry, the problem is I didn't put test DB first place. That is use test DB. And then I'm going to try to connect this. Still, I'm getting an error. Okay, so you can see the command is first of all you have to use the test database, and then we have to use this command. So what we did so far, right? Now we have used test DB, which is replicated now now we are in the secondary. So let me show you right now. Here is my secondary and here is my primary, right? So the data is available in the primary. Now this is in the secondary. We created the database and also the test document within the primary. And what we have observed is now it is replicated. The database is there. When I say show databases, you saw that. And then this is how we are accessing it. Now, apart from earlier, usually when we say find, we say db.collection.find should give us. But we have to say that we have to read from the secondary. So what it means is what is the preferred mode of reading the data, secondary members, right? So that's why we said read preference and we said secondary, which indicates that we are saying that, okay, we are prefer to read from the secondary, and from there we actually got the result. Okay, just to elaborate, like just to summarize what we have done so far, we created 3 replica set and we connected to the primary, and then we define the other 2 as secondaries, and then we create a simple text document in the primary, and we visited the second one and we observed that the data is also replicated there, and we were able to query data from that server. Okay, right. I'm trying the third one as well. So I type the command Mongo shell. I type port 27019 and it was a success. And then I type show databases, which shows you our test database here as well. So it's replicated, replication success. We use the test DB, and then let's take the command DB test collection 1 find, and we have to say a read preference as secondary. Yes, the document is available in the third one as well. Let me share the command. So here is the command that we have used. Okay, now what I'm going to do is now just see what happens if there's a failure, right? Now, one of the things that I want to discuss next is when there's a failure in this particular case, primary, one of these, the secondaries should take it as a primary. Now you can see here is what we have, the primary, and these are the 2 secondaries. Now I'm going to just use the command to say that, okay, it's going to show you the failover. To do that, I'm going to ask this server to step down. So the command is that rs dot step down D capital. Now what happens here is I'm asking the primary to step down, which I mean, I'm going to imitate the failure that it's same as the primary is not available. Now, ideally, what we expect to happen is one of these secondaries should take over as the primary. So let's see what will happen. So I'm going to say rs step down, and then I press enter, and it becomes a secondary. Yes. Now you can just check what has happened, rs status. So just type it here, rs status, just to see what has happened. Now you can see what has happened here? We have the new primary is to 27,018. That becomes the primary. So RS status. Now you can see here, this becomes secondary now, and this is the primary. So you can see now this is the primary. I'm using the status, and these two become the secondary. So this is our new primary. So you see that when there's a failure in one of the machines, what happens when you have replica set, it will take one of them takes as a primary, which is what we want to see, and which is what we call high availability, right? So this is what exactly what we want to do. So now we have new primary, right? So let's just check now, since this is the primary, let me enter the command. I'm going to just type db.test column and find, and the document is available. Because now it's primary, you can directly enter the command. Now, one command that we have used is read preference secondary. Now, when we say secondary, we will read it from our secondary servers or secondaries we have defined. But we can set this in the primary instance. So the idea is, now since we have 3 servers, we have primary and 2 secondary servers. When you want to read or when you want to query, you can read it from master or the primary, or you can read it from the secondary. So non-critical queries, usually we prefer to read from secondaries because we will make the different load. Right? So the command is, okay, but before that, I think we should check. How many of you have noticed that when you say step down from primary, and have you observed that one of the secondaries take over in your case as well? So the last part of the session, I would like to configure the read preference. So in this particular case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to connect to my new primary instance, and then I'm going to set the read preference to say that I prefer the secondary reads. So the command is, I can say, okay, db.getMongo. Then I will say, okay, set read preference as secondary. Right? And then let me try to get the first command, right? And we can use them. Same command I'm trying to use here as well, db.test column 1 dot find. Okay. Okay, we have used it earlier. Let me check. Ideally, what we expect is so let me check it here as well. db.test column 1 dot find. Right. Otherwise, what happens is we have to say read preference. This we have done earlier as well. Secondary. Yeah. So it's available. Um, So what we did is actually we create a new command. Now in this particular case, the command is, we are going to set it to read from the secondary. So one thing to test this one is actually I can have another shell where I can say which one is the primary and which one is the secondary. And just check whether this is working. So let me try to do that. So what has happened is I was trying to set up read preferences here. You can see the command that I have used here in the primary. I said db get mongo and set read preference secondary. I just want to check whether it's working. So which is, I'm actually got some error here. Just to check with the separately. So let me take another shell and see whether this is working. Right now, what I'm trying to do here is I'm going to create separately the Mongo shell where we define what host and what secondaries are. Let me check. So let's go to the program files. Right. So what I'm trying to do is I'm going to say Mongo shell. So the host is 27.0.18. Let's say the port, meaning the secondary is 27,090. See whether this is working. No, that is not working. Usually it should work. Let me check and get back to you exactly checking what's wrong here. Because once you set the set ready preference from the secondary, I expect to directly give you the command without read preference secondary because we set it up. So let
So
me,
you need to set up that Mongo parameter in secondary first.
Okay. So what do you mean by that is when you set read preferences, should I, sorry.
We did it on primary, right? So it should be on a secondary and then execute the same command.
Okay, so maybe, yeah, let me check. So db dot, now I got the point. Mongo, and then say set read preference in secondary. And then let me check directly find. Yes, thanks. Okay, just to explain, thanks Sachit for correcting me. The problem that I had was, if you remember earlier, when you just use in the secondary, if you allow this code, you will get an server error, which means you are not going to set it up. But when you say you are basically setting this, saying that you prefer to read from the secondary, you can set it this using db.getMongo, set read preference secondary. So once you set this up, now you can directly, use the command to read from the secondary. Right. I think those are the things that I would like to discuss for the today's session. Just to summarize what we did for today's session, we created several replica set. In our case, we create 3 replica set, and then they have assigned as primary and the other 2 as secondaries. And then we create a sample document, and within the document, once we create the document in the primary, we have observed by visiting the secondary that it has actually replicated. And then we immediate the failover by stepping down the primary. And we have observed that one of the secondaries will take over as the primary. And also we discuss how to set it up to read from the secondary. So these are the main points that we have discussed within today's session. Now, there are a few other things that you could try. I can give you links on these. For example, how do you get when you want to write something? Remember, now reading is okay, but when you want to write, you have to make sure that you have to get the consent from the other members as well, right? So that is another thing that we need to discuss. Okay, I think this is all what I have you for today. The next session is also another lab session where I would like to talk about the sharding and the scalability. Remember, we discussed the idea of sharding last time. Theoretically, we discussed. We need to discuss how to create a cluster and how to distribute the data, and then how to perform queries. So this part I will discuss in the next session. But before that, make sure that you have understood everything that I have discussed in this session, because these basics we need for the next session. So take your time. In case if you fail, please go through the recording again, try to set it up. And I have seen some of you have already finished, which means the others you can get the help from the colleagues. So go through this. So the next week, I'm going to talk about how to set up what we call the sharded cluster, and also how we can, work on those, right? So that's what we are going to discuss in the next session. Thank you, guys. So I'm going to finish for today then, and we'll meet next week on MongoDB. One more thing that I want to discuss very briefly, I want to discuss transaction. With that, we will finish MongoDB part, right? And then we are going to look at the big data analytics. I have one more database in mind, that is graph database Neo4j. Let's see, since we have some time, I think I might be able to cover that as well. Okay, thanks everyone. Then we'll meet next week.